This is a video of Circle Drive, the loop highway around the city of Saskatoon, Canada on April 17, 2020, during afternoon rush hours, nearly a month after initial COVID-19 restrictions were put in place. And this is another footage of the same road, a bit more than a year later on April 21st, 2021, also during afternoon rush hours. Looking at these footages, you can easily tell that the footage in 2021 looks more crowded and there were significantly more cars driving on the road. Obviously, COVID is still an issue and the city is still facing lots of restrictions. So, did COVID really help delay climate changes and other environmental problems? Let's find out. Well, it did. Not really. By April 2020, when economies and countries entered lockdowns, economic growth came to a halt. Restrictions were put in place, and certainly much less people went to work or to recreational locations. However, emissions reductions from the lockdowns appear to be rather small. It was estimated that daily global CO2 emissions decreased by only 17% by early April 2020, compared to the mean 2019 levels, with an overall decrease of nearly 2.3 billion tons in 2020. A research on Nature.com found that emissions had been lowest since World War II, before the rise of automobiles and highways. However, things did not stay the same throughout the summer months of 2020. It only took a few months before carbon emissions started to rise again. This time was nearly as high as before the pandemic. Take a look at this graph of emissions in 2019 and 2020. You can tell that there were points that emissions were even higher than before the pandemic, despite new lockdowns and restrictions were imposed to help curb the spread of the second wave in late 2020. Meanwhile, public transportation ridership did not increase as much as car ridership when restrictions were eased. Take a look at this bus on a high-frequent route during rush hour in Saskatoon. There were barely any people, much less riders than a normal rush hour, contradicting the heavy flow of cars. Public transportation faces low ridership not just in Canada, but also in various places in the world. In Stockholm, Sweden, this graph explained the low ridership and ticket sales for Stockholm Metro and buses, while also pointing out the unchanged ridership per day during lockdowns and after lockdowns. The city of Tampere in Finland also witnessed a 70% decrease in public transit ridership. Meanwhile, in Australia, riderships on trains and other forms of transit in major cities cannot increase in a V-shape as planned, despite the rapid increase of other activities as the lockdowns were eased, according to this graph by Google Community Mobility Report. So what were the reasons behind this slow return to normal public transit? There are two essential reasons behind this incidence. According to a research by the Sydney Institute of Transport and Logistics Studies and the University of Sydney Business School, concerns about the risk of COVID-19 has decreased significantly since the initial outbreaks, but it was still much higher compared to before COVID-19. It's understandable that buses, trains, and trams have seats that are adjacent to each other, while the windows should be kept closed most of the time. These unsafe factors made people tend to avoid using them because of the fear of catching the virus in a closed space from close contacts, despite wearing masks and socially distancing. Another crucial reason was the inconvenience that passengers face due to the reduced frequency. Multiple systems have to reduce buses due to temporary discontinuation of fare collection as well as plummeted ridership. Services were cut and hours of operation were limited. Even when restrictions were eased, capacities of buses were still limited to just the available seats, just to maintain the physical distance. Saskatoon Transit, for example, limited their capacity of the fleet by 30%, from 60 passengers per bus to only 40. This made passengers have to wait more during peak hours, or have to choose an off-peak hour to travel, or not to travel at all. Consider the current frequency of 15 to 30 minutes per bus. This is monstrously inaccessible, rather than inconvenient. The situation is much worse for people with disabilities. They either have to limit their travel routines or ask for help from others to travel, which pose even greater risk to their health. So, in conclusion, COVID-19 did delay the effects of global warming and climate changes, but not really. You are not wrong if you say yes, but it's just a very narrow point of view to the problem. COVID will eventually add more significant risk to the environment in the long run, not just in emission, but also in the other aspects like hazardous and medical waste. But if public transit can be redesigned to accommodate more passengers in a friendlier and safer way during the pandemic, the positive externalities on the economics, environment, and people can be gigantic.